Hi, welcome everyone. We're back to DisruptCRE in Chicago in the Willis Tower on the 99th floor. We're here with the Looks Like We Made It graduating from your co-working space panel. We're here for overtime. I'm going to introduce, we had our moderator Jason Goodrich, the founder and CEO of Leasable, is to my left. Alex Newman, VP of Sales from Pivot Desk. Welcome.
Hello.
Bradley Surratt. Did I say that right?
You nailed it.
Perfect. Executive Vice President of CBRE, and Desiree Vargas Wrigley, the CEO and co-founder of Give Forward.
That's right.
Welcome, everyone.
Thanks
It's
for
great to
having
be
us.
here.
So let's start. What was the panel about? Co-working space, graduating from it. From my experience, knowing people in the end user space, startups, broker side, it can be a nightmare. Talk about what we were framing in that.
Kind of a no man's land for information and help for these fledgling companies, and we talked about what the solutions were for them, what Desiree went through when she graduated from incubator. So we wanted to put all the information out there about what their challenges and their choices are.
Sure, perfect. Desiree, that's a great transition into what was your experience when you were leaving the co-working space?
So we were part of an incubator that said 10 days later, like, go off, fly, and we had no place to go. So we went back to our old landlord, and he carved out a space for us on a floor that was for sale that was just, a little corner with cubicle walls, and it just wasn't what we needed. I mean, we needed our own space. We needed a conference room. And so we went out looking, and it was just an impossible task. We had very little money to put towards a security deposit. We couldn't do a build-out, so every place we were looking at was just kind of old and beaten up, and, and then they wanted these really long leases. And so we kind of felt like there was just no market that was able to accommodate us. And we thought it was kind of a symptom of what was happening in Chicago's startup scene, and I think that's partially true, but I think it's happening all over the country.
Right. I totally agree. I think that's it's a great transition where something that you're addressing. Let's talk about Pivot Desk and what the service that you guys provide and how you would help someone like Desiree out.
Yeah, so we help a lot of companies that graduate from Techstars and co-working and accelerators, incubators. The model is all per person per month. So companies that have unused or excess office space in their office can post it on Pivot Desk on a per person per month basis. And then companies can book that space on a month-to-month basis, typically around 11 to 12 months until they graduate to the next space and get their own traditional lease. And so where Pivot Desk really comes into play with the accelerators is these companies are coming out. They've been in this program for 3 or 4 months. Maybe they raise a little bit of money. They have an Excel spreadsheet with growth plans on it, which normally changes from time to time. And so what we call it is right space for right now. So if you're 10 people, you can book space for 10 people. When you get to 20, then you pay for 20 people, and so on and so forth, till you're ready to get your own lease, usually at that 25, 30-person mark. Then we flip you over to CBRE and Brad, and then he can help you out and his team. And then you kind of become the other side where you have access space, because typically when a company takes a lease, they have somewhere between 20 to 40% unused right off the bat. And then he's happy, we're happy, and the companies are happy because they're not stuck in some big commitment without the ability to offset those costs.
Right, that's great. And Brad, as a great segue, you're coming from the traditional brokerage side where, Desiree, as she mentioned, I would say from my experience also knowing something about it, the business model wasn't traditionally built for startups. You guys are looking for longer leases traditionally, and then you have co-working space that came about, and they need a new way to do business, lower leases, things like that. So I've heard, coming to Chicago, you are the broker to turn to for startups. Tell us about that and how you've helped someone like Desiree.
That's it. One-stop
Super
shop.
broker.
Super broker. That's it. Angel investor. Yeah, exactly. Super broker. No,
Where's the key?
Yeah. It really, so I help companies from all sizes, shapes, but the reality is the challenge occurs when it's between, Pivot Desk or Leasable and the broker. That size range of, call it 1 employee to that 20 employees that need their own autonomy for whatever reason, and they want their own autonomy, and they want their own space, and where do they go and find it? And a lot of the brokers in our industry aren't paying attention to the smaller spaces in the market. A lot of landlords aren't even offering small spaces in the market because they don't want to slice up a building for 1,000 square feet because it's an awkward portion of space. So there's
It's a mindset, right? It's a mindset that they're not used to it.
So there's lots of challenges, when it comes to helping smaller companies find office space. We do love to turn to the leasables and the pivot desks of the world, candidly, because it's a great solution, and the most important part about it is flexibility for our clients.
Right.
And when you're a small startup signing a long-term lease, it's just not only do you not want to do it, it's who am I to say this, but it's irresponsible potentially if you're going to sign a long-term lease, and it's costly.
Well, Jason, I was going to turn to you. There's a business model that can be created that can serve people like Desiree's needs. Let's talk about that business model, what it looks like.
Yeah, I mean, it's similar to Pivot Desk in that it's between co-working and a long-term lease. And we like to call it space as a service, because we're going to get you into your own space, whether it's retail or office, from 1 day to 3 years, depending on what you need. And so as you grow, you don't have to worry about subleasing the space or anything like that.
Right.
You've got your own culture to build in your own space. And when it doesn't work, you either grow up or you grow out, then there's nothing left dragging behind you to drag you down.
Right. And so to clarify, we have co-working spaces where you have people coming in, and then you have things like you want your own space, right? Like an office, and that's what Leasable's for.
Yeah, it is. You can get your own space with a license agreement, or basically it's kind of like co-working, but outside the four walls of co-working.
Right.
So we want to turn the entire world into plug-and-play space.
Right. Brad, how do we get the traditional brokerage world to be more like you and understand that there is a business model like Leasables and Pivot Desk to work with, so they can, more people like Desiree can have a great experience when going out of this in this time?
I mean, I think a lot of brokers are getting on board, right, with the Pivot Desks and Leasables of the world, because they know that their clients have a problem and there's no solution except the Leasables and Pivot Desks of the world. It makes a lot of sense. So I think that it's a learning process, and it's coming, right?
Yeah. And if you can think of it like a farm system, whether baseball or a fish, where we take the little fish that the brokers don't want, or they can't make a big meal out of them, and when they grow up, we feed them back to them.
Right.
I think the biggest thing is looking at it as a partnership. There's not one solution for anyone, and as companies grow, I was saying this in the other panel, real estate is static and businesses are dynamic. Yep. And when you go from a co-working space to a Pivot Desk or a Leasable to a traditional space and go up and down and growth and shrink and that type of thing, you really need a team. We have hundreds and hundreds of brokers signed up on Pivot Desk using it every single day, and putting their clients in the right solution. If it's not the right spot for them to be, maybe they kick it to Pivot Desk. We get companies every single day saying, hey, I'm looking for my next space. I'm outgrowing this space. I know that I can give it to Brad, and he's going to be able to provide the correct solution, whether their growth plans change in 6 months or change in 6 years.
Right. So those are the kind of brokers that are worth their weight in gold. They're actually advisors to the business, and they'll do what's right for them versus trying to get them in the biggest, longest lease that they can, and that happens.
Right, absolutely. Desiree, let's turn back to you, because you started as a very small shop, and then you've grown. So you've been through these phases a few times. When you first went into it, did you have a team that he's describing around you to go through this and navigate it, or were you wishing that there was the Leasables and Pivot Desk around at that point?
Yeah, no, I wish there was Leasable and Pivot Desk around back then. We quickly went from the two of us, to 7 pretty quickly, and outgrew that little cubicle space. And so we had to find a place that we thought we could, grow into over the next 2 years. That was the shortest lease we could find. I tried talking to brokers, but I just felt like we were too small for the ones I was talking to. I didn't know you then.
No, yeah, it's okay. No offense, Dave.
But we literally my husband and I drove the streets between Roscoe Village and the West Loop looking for signs in commercial spaces for just a small shop.
Wow.
And so we ended up finding, street level space that everyone loved, and it was fine, but we outgrew it really, really quickly, like in 6 months. And so we ended up having to break that lease and become the landlord ourselves.
What was that like? Because I can imagine you have a million and one things as an entrepreneur to think about to grow your business, and you're having to deal with real estate problems and breaking leases. That must have been a nightmare.
Yeah, it was, and in a way you feel like you were stupid or short-sighted or something, but you have no way of knowing that you're going to have success or not, and so you want to limit your liability, so you sometimes go smaller than you think you might need because you don't want to have all this empty office space. So it was frustrating. It was honestly more time-consuming than raising capital, because it was like both sides of the equation felt like they were putting pressure on me.
Wow.
And I guess that also says that we had a pretty easy round that first time. So, but yeah, no, it was really, really hard. And even then, when we moved into our newest space, we were outgrowing it, and we were trying to figure out what to do. And we were looking at really expensive places, thinking we were going to raise a big round. And then when we decided not to raise a big round, we were terrified because we can't take on this kind of lease. And so we're lucky we're in a space that we were able to expand up and down, and it's like all contiguous, but most companies don't have that.
So for a lot of startups that might be watching, or we're being recording this and they're going to be watching, from the first time that you were describing your experience, you were in the car, you're searching for listings, the first time to now, what would you do now differently? Even having these services at your fingertips.
Yeah, no, I think I would have gotten a better idea of what my team would want before going out with a broker, because I thought we could just go back to the loop and it wouldn't be a big deal. And so we wasted a lot of time looking at places that were just not going to make the team happy. I would have not done that. And then I also would have looked for places that had smaller spaces that were connecting that you could potentially grow into earlier. And there are those places that exist. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point. I mean, when we're advising companies, that's the big challenge. Is the first thing we would try to do is understand their business and really try to get an understanding of their employees and transportation and what they like and they don't like, before we actually go and spend time looking at spaces because they need 2,000, 3,000, 5,000 square feet, and that's one of the false starts that a lot of companies make up front. And again, you don't know what you don't know until you go through the process.
We have a lot of companies on Pivot Desk that take probably 50 to 60% more space than they need right away, and then they just Pivot Desk the unused space, and then they grow into their own space, and then they never have to move for 5 or 7 or 10 years. And I mean, you probably know moving is not the most fun thing in the world. Everybody here knows, especially moving, productivity goes down, loss of a lot of different things, and so.
We would absolutely do it that way now that you all exist and are, easy to access. But back in the day, it wasn't an option.
I wish we would have existed then. Right?
Me too.
I hear that almost every day. Where were you when?
Exactly. Brad, I want to ask you, or maybe anybody else, but from the landlord side, do you see more landlords, in Chicago especially, do you see more landlords being open to, breaking their traditional model in the way they've been thinking about leasing space?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of landlords that are finally on board with understanding the startup scene, understanding that they have to be flexible, they have to be creative with the way they structure leases. The traditional days of a 5, 7, or 10-year lease have really not gone away, but you have some entrepreneurial landlords like Sterling Bay or Berkeley Properties. Now even Tishman Spires is on board in Chicago with building out furnished, ready-to-go spec suites. And it's not just that the physical space is there, which is the creative part. It's actually that they're understanding that the lease term and securitization, they're going to have to take some risks. They understand that, and I think that's the biggest part. Before, they weren't willing to even compromise or take those risks, and today they actually will.
Yeah, the big stopping, the hurdle for them was risk and cost. What kind of risk am I going to take on my ROI, getting it back on a short-term lease? Or are they going to damage it, hold over, that sort of thing? So once you can address that and mitigate the risks, you can't mitigate everything, all the risk and cost out of something. But if you take ready-to-go space or spec suite space and curate or qualify the tenants, the space seekers coming in, then all of a sudden the Tishman Spires of the world say, yeah, we'll do it, just don't make it a headache for us.
Yeah, I mean, to piggyback on what you guys are saying, I talk to landlords every single day, and we have national and international contracts with landlords that want to use Pivot Desk as a perk to their clients, to be able to be creative, to get those clients to be able to take the risk. It could turn into the next Google or Facebook or giant company that triples in size, and they want to be able to take advantage of that. And so you got to be creative. Companies don't want 10-year in the box leases. They want year, 2-year, 3-year leases. This is what I think I'm going to be, but I also want the flexibility to change and shift and be able to adapt if my business does that, due to the fact that landlords want big, huge, long leases, and businesses don't. Right? And the fact that I don't know if I'll be around in 6 months or 6 years, that's scary.
Right.
even companies that are now we think of as really big companies like Groupon, when we were first representing them, I mean, they went from 10 employees to thousands in a very short period of time. But all the leases that we signed for them, they were short term. They were 6-month leases, and it was our job as their advisor to find ready to go existing conditioned space. But taking it a step further was being their storyteller, right, and crafting the message to the landlord that this is an opportunity. This is a company that's growing. They're they're the fastest growing company in the world. Not every company has that story behind them, but it was easier to sell for us, and they bought it. And not a lot of landlords would buy that because they're like, Groupon who, right? And they didn't know them at that time. So, point being is that you have to be flexible, and a lot of landlords are seeing that now.
But those landlords want to go back and say,
Oh my
come on
gosh.
over here, Groupon.
Yeah, because the thought now is that they feel like they could have had a 400,000 square foot headquarter transaction in the event that they would have had them come initially start growing in their building. They would have stayed.
Right. So, I mean, this is a good segue. Do you think that the days of those type leasing in that business model, I don't want to say it's over, but those are coming to more of a close where, even the larger companies are going to kind of recognize, I don't care if I'm large or small, I want more of an option because that's what doing a shorter lease is.
I don't know that it'll come to a close or come to a halt. I think that the leases will get more creative. I think landlords will be open to more options. I think at the end of the day, landlords are making this massive investment into a building, and they want their investment back, and they want a big, huge return on it.
Right.
And I get it, right? I want a 10 or a 20 or 50-year lease because I don't have to do anything for a while, right? Well, what happens when businesses or the demand or the buyers constantly changing, or you need to be able to adapt to it. And I think landlords want to still be able to have that high ROI, but be able to adapt, because then they can continue to get new properties and buy new properties and acquire new spaces and grow into new markets. And how do you do that? You become the favorite landlord.
Right.
And look at
I want to
look
ask,
at the
I was going to say,
Tishmans.
follow up. Maybe it's a good thing, right? Because does that
Yeah, I
make
would say-
you, as the end user, if you could, does it make you feel more comfortable if you could lease out a space for 20 years and never think about it again? If you found that space, like, is that okay with you? Are you happy with that?
I don't know.
No, you're allowed to answer.
Yeah,
No,
no,
please.
I don't. We just never know what our business is going to be in 2 years, and so to say that we could find a home and plant ourselves there, and it's not a lifestyle business that I'm growing; it's a scaling tech company.
Right.
So I just can't imagine putting in those kind of roots. But I was going to add that I think there are very entrepreneurial landlords that are out there that once you pitch them on your business and they actually become kind of personally and emotionally invested in your success, especially if you're there for longer than a year, you can build these really strong relationships where the lease terms become a lot more flexible. And we had a personal guarantee that then was removed in our next lease and things like that. That only happened because of the trust that we've built up over the last couple years.
Yeah, I mean, the thing I was going to say is it, in addition to just crafting, the message and the personal connection, because all those things are they're very important. To Alex's point, I mean, it really depends on the amount of capital that a landlord spends on the physical space. They have to amortize those costs over a lease, and if it's a big bucket of concessions that they're going to give a tenant, they have a long lease, and there's no way around it. And so, in theory, it would be great if we could have lots of, short-term leases out there, but you can't make sense of the numbers by doing that. And
Right.
so,
That makes sense.
I have lots of clients that are kind of at the C and D round of, raising their fundraising, and, their vision of signing, they can sign longer-term leases because they have the vision, so long as we have flexibility like termination options or rights of first offer or expansion options built into the lease.
Getting creative is what
Getting
we were
creative.
saying. Right.
Yeah, that's
Right.
super important. And just one thing historically about lease terms, you've seen it come down from 25 to it just broke 5 years not too long ago. And I think you're going to see it continue to go down on an average. The landlord-tenant is going to become more of a partnership where, a symbiotic relationship. They got to realize that, they're both part of each other's ecosystem.
Right.
And so I think telling the right story to get them introduced to the right people, just like dating, is going to be really important to both parties.
Right, and that's to your point, that's great that CBRE and whatever company is helping the business tell that story, and that's going to be you guys as well. Yeah. Last question. This has been great. We'll run down the list, and somebody might say someone else's, but just expand on it. You have 3 important pieces of information to give to someone graduating from their co-working space. Go. If you want to give
usually
one, you can do
small,
one, but
Absolutely.
however you want to go.
Yeah. Don't think too much about it. Don't go over budget. Don't get crazy cool tech space. That's really it. Just
Okay.
don't go over your budget.
Let's say focus on culture, focus on collaboration, and focus on energy. If you put those three things together, location is great, but what the inside of the office looks like, if everyone's happy and can work together, that's the most important. You want to build a culture. You want to get to the fact that you're blowing through leases in 6, 12, 18 months. That's a good problem to have. It's when you sign a big lease and you got to go the other way.
Right.
That's the bad part.
Very true.
Yeah, coming from a broker that represents companies, I mean, you don't hear too many of us say, "Don't go long on real estate. Don't go long on real estate." You know, so you don't. I mean, be nimble, be flexible, focus on your business, grow your business, and when you get your real estate legs again and you outgrow and bust at the seams, we call that a high-class problem. You know, then you'll come see me.
I would say make friends with startups that are a little bit ahead of you, because if they're gonna grow, you can take over their space, and if you are friends truly, then you probably have a similar culture. So the environment will, the desired environment will be similar. And I would also say that walking into a big open room with white walls is like good enough for pretty much every startup, and that you can make any space your own, just with some paint and some like art that you find collectively online. And if you come to our office, it's very eclectic and not sexy at all, but it absolutely reflects our style and the people there. So I think you can do a lot on a little budget.
That's great. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
This has been, looks like we made it, graduating from your co-working space. So thank you, and see you soon.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.